All right, guys, if you are an owner of a residential or commercial service business and you paid any contractors, landlords, attorneys, consultants, whoever it might be in 2025, this episode's for you. Today, we're talking all things 1099s, who actually needs them, why the IRS cares, and what will happen if you potentially ignore them. Right. So Kelly here is with us again today. She's our director of tax at FRAXN. Kelly, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
Good. So Kelly, just a quickly level set. What is a 1099 and why should these service owners, business owners care about them?
So 1099s are a form that the IRS requires all businesses to issue to anybody that has provided any type of service to your business. So that means if you have paid somebody for subcontracting or legal services, accounting services, tax services, landlords, the scope is pretty wide as to would be covered. We can dive into that a little bit more. But a 1099 is simply a mechanism to let the IRS know that you have paid a certain business a certain amount of money, and then the IRS uses that as a tool to, kind of create checks and balances to make sure the recipient is also reporting that income on their tax return and paying their appropriate taxes.
And then if owners did ignore 1099s, any big deal there? What were potential ramifications if they were ignored?
Yeah, great question. A lot of people think it doesn't apply to them and they just tend to, turn the other cheek and don't think that it's going to have any implications. So the IRS does assess penalties, interest, potential payroll taxes if there's an issue with misclassification, which we can talk about in a little bit more detail. But you are required to file your 1099s with the IRS by January 31st each year. The IRS does charge penalties for late filing. However, they are pretty lenient on that. And I don't know any client I've ever worked with that has ever had a penalty assessed. Bottom line is get them filed, even if it's past the filing deadline. The IRS would much rather see you file them late than not at all. I did have a client that I worked with in Wisconsin that had not filed their 1099s until probably September of each year. And it was a consistent practice that they did this year over year, and they never saw any penalties. So bottom line is get them filed.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. And I don't think of leniency when I think of the IRS, but I guess in this case they are. I feel like I hear a lot on calls, Kelly, that, they're not a subcontractor. I don't need to file a 1099, right? I feel like that's probably a misconception based on what you're saying. So can you provide some clarity on, maybe who needs a 1099, who doesn't?
So essentially, anybody that is providing any sort of service to your business that you are paying, they are required to have a 1099 issued unless certain criteria is applicable. For example, if they're a C corporation or an S corporation, a 1099 is not required. If you have paid them via credit card, Venmo, PayPal, any of those sort of mechanisms, a 1099 is not required from you because the PayPals and the credit card companies, they will be issuing their own 1099 for those transactions as they are required to do. So the only exception to filing 1099s is if you've paid with a credit card or you have a W-9 from the vendor stating that they are an S corporation or a C corporation. As far as subcontractors, this is a pretty wide net that would include anybody that is providing any type of services for you, whether it's repairs or maintenance or, filling in when you have a shortfall and you need somebody to help pick up some slack. Attorneys, accountants, landlords, just about anybody that's providing a service. So if you are paying a plumber to come in and fix something and they're charging you for supplies and labor, you issue the 1099 for the full amount, and it's up to the recipient to break out those costs that are not labor specific. So it's not your job to figure that out. It's theirs when they're doing their filings.
So I guess the parts piece, you don't necessarily have to issue a 1099 for. Like if you're purchasing supplies or like from a chemical vendor or whoever, those types of things don't need 1099s.
Correct. When you go and you purchase supplies from a retailer, that is not a service-oriented transaction. That is not required to be reported on a 1099.
So I guess when I think about, a lot of our clients, like we said, residential, commercial service business owners, who are some, more specific common vendors that they would have that are providing services that they would need?
So pretty much anything you outsource. If you have an IT support company that you're working with, you have a web designer, a marketing company, you work with somebody that does, the door-to-door knocking, anything that's a service-oriented activity is required to be reported on 1099. If you have family that you bring in to help out here and there, and you're not paying them a lot, but you are, just writing them a check, technically they have to have a 1099 issued. If you're doing that instead of issuing them a W-2, there's going to be further impacts for the person receiving that they need to make sure that they're aware of. So, the IRS may come back at some point and say, these family members that you've been employing, they are not independent contractors. They are truly employees, and you misclassified them. You could have a whole lot of a headache on your hands to deal with that. So making sure that you're properly classifying independent contractors as independent contractors and employees as employees is important. And aside from that, it's just going to be anybody that's providing any sort of service. Any service-oriented transactions are required to be reported if applicable. Best way to determine if it's applicable is to have that W-9 from your vendor indicating how they file their taxes. That's what drives whether or not a 1099 is going to be necessary.
Okay, gotcha. So, that thing a lot about our clients, pretty much all of our clients have rent, whether they're paying a third party for rent or they're paying, a related party, maybe they own the building in a separate entity or something. So any client's going to have rent, essentially. I think a lot about our clients, regardless of the industry they're in, they're paying a marketing firm, a lot of them, to help them with their advertising and marketing approaches. They're paying us, right? If they're a client, which bookkeeper, accountants. There's really a lot of places in which, or a lot of, areas or realms in which 1099s need to be issued for clients.
Correct. And for 2025 and earlier, the threshold for issuing those 1099s was $600. Effective January 1st of 2026 and forward, that threshold is $2,000. But it's still good practice to track them right out of the gate so that you don't have to try to go back in time to get information when time is of the essence to get things filed.
That makes sense. And you mentioned, kind of deadlines, getting W-9s. What are best practices for potential clients of ours around 1099s?
The best practice is to get that W-9 before you write that first check to a vendor. They're much more willing to provide that information right out of the gate when they want to get paid. Sometimes you use somebody once or twice, you've already crossed that threshold, and now you're coming back 6 or 9 or 12 months later, and you want them to give you a W-9, and they may or may not be very compliant. So getting them right out of the gate is the very best practice. When we're using QuickBooks Online, we have the ability to upload those W-9s directly into QuickBooks and, click a little checkbox that says that we're going to track them for 1099s or that we're not, whatever the case may be. But having those W-9s in there makes it easier for me to come in after the fact and make sure that it is appropriate to issue a 1099 and get that issued timely if we're contracted to do that for them.
So you mentioned Cubio. I know that's a great tool. Double, which is the work management platform we use, it has some 1099 capabilities also. So there's some good tools that we can leverage. Definitely makes the job easier. I guess when thinking about if I put myself in a client's shoes or business owner's shoes, maybe checking the boxes on who I would need to request a W-9 from or who I would need to issue a 1099 for. It's if they're not an employee, if they're providing a service, not necessarily selling me products, but the service, not the product piece. I'm not paying them through a credit card. If I can check those 3 boxes, I more than likely need to issue a 1099 and get a W-9 from them. Huh?
Yes, that's correct. And it's really important to call out the fact that these 1099s are, they're everybody's problem. They don't go away. They're not necessarily not applicable to anybody in particular. I think a lot of people have the misconception that, I'm not dealing with that. My my tax accountant is taking care of that, or my bookkeeper took care of that. So it's really important to make sure that there's good communication between the client and whoever is going to be issuing those 1099s, or if the client is doing them on their own, they need to make sure that they understand what needs to be done and getting them done.
Ultimately, our job at FRAXN is to make their job easier, their life easier. So we're doing the brunt. We really just need the W-9s. That's all we're requesting, because we can see all the other information. As long as we have the W-9, we can take it from there.
Correct.
So we mentioned deadlines. It's January 31st every year. By the time people are hearing this conversation, we're probably past the deadline. If that's the case, to your earlier point, no big deal. Still get it filed, because something filed is better than nothing filed.
If the deadline is passed, that doesn't mean that you're off the hook. It still means you got to get it done. If you don't file 1099s and you're required to, the IRS could potentially come back and, do an audit on your tax return and disallow expenses that should have been 1099 to a recipient. If you did not do that, and the IRS deems you should have, they could disallow those expense deductions on your tax return, which nobody wants to see happen.
Depending on the size of the business, obviously, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, disallowed. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's steep. So, I guess we've talked about 1099s, thinking about how this would apply for our clients or potential clients, their taxes at the end of the year, right? A lot of our clients are set up as pass-through entities, right? So their businesses aren't necessarily paying the taxes. It's flowing through to their personal taxes. About a lot of our clients, a common pain point is, what are estimated payments? Why am I getting these penalties and interest for not making estimated payments? I thought I just had to file taxes and pay my tax liability, at the end of the year. So when we think about 1099s and our clients needing to issue them, file them, claim that income and expense, and that flowing through to their personal returns, how does that play into the whole estimated tax payments?
The IRS requires, if anybody has a balance due to the IRS of greater than $1,000, you are required to make estimated payments on a quarterly basis. And those dates are going to be April 15th, June 15th, September 15th, and then the subsequent January 15th. And that's, in the year of the tax. So 2025, you should have made estimated payments by April 15th, June 15th, September 15th, and then just most recently, January 15th of 26 for the tax year 2025. What that represents is that the IRS wants you to not have a large balance due and not have to pay penalties and interest. If you do not make estimated payments and have a balance due, there are, hefty penalties and interest that they assess that nobody wants to see that money just flushed away. So estimated payments are going to take care of your tax liability, either from your pass-through entity if you're getting a K-1, if you're reporting on a Schedule C, because you're getting a 1099 as an individual and you're just reporting that through. On a Schedule C, all of that income is going to be subject to self-employment taxes. And that's going to be 15.3% plus whatever your ordinary income tax rate would, which could be anywhere from 10% up to 25, 30%. So every dollar you are receiving on a 1099 personally is going to be subject to taxes anywhere from 25 to 35, 50%. So those estimated payments are necessary to make sure that you don't have that large liability at the end of the year. Having
accurate 1099s, both on the income side and the expense side, help you get better estimated payments, it sounds like.
Yeah, and the IRS has what's called, they've got a safe harbor rule. And when we do your tax return each year, if you have a liability, we will calculate estimated payments for you. As long as you're adhering to the schedule of estimated payments that were calculated for you based on the prior year, you shouldn't have any, significant penalties or interest as long as that liability is paid by April 15th. Now, if you go on an extension and you're not paying that balance until October 15th, there will be interest and penalties for not having paid it by April 15th.
Man, there's a lot here. So I guess maybe recapping some of the big points, right? 1099s, they're not just for subcontractors, right? Landlords, accountants like us, attorneys, marketing firms, whoever, professional services, right? A lot of different folks need them. I guess if you don't file and you're supposed to, potentially could have penalties, But at the end of the day, if you even file them late, the IRS is still going to probably be happy with that and potentially not penalize you. And as far as best practices go, get a W-9 before you pay a vendor. That way, if whether they need one or not, you at least have it, and you're able to issue a 1099 if needed.
And, tacking onto that, I would also suggest using QuickBooks as a tool to save all that information. So you can upload those W-9s right into the system for the vendor and click a box that says track it. It's just going to make life easier.
FRAXN, obviously, with our clients, we are managing their QuickBooks, and our work management platform also can help facilitate
Absolutely.
that too, right? So it can definitely be a good resource there. So I guess, Kelly, if there's a business owner listening to us right now, and he's like, "Oh man, I missed the boat on 2025. I really messed up," and they're worried right now. Like, what can they do? What's something they should do?
They should reach out to us and let's get it done as soon as possible. More than happy to work with individual clients to look through their activity, their vendors, to see where we need to issue 1099s and help facilitate getting that done.
Well, there you have it, guys. If you want clean books, if you want a less scary tax season, if you want 1099s off your plate, that's what we're here for. That's what FRAXN does. That's our bread and butter. So click the link in the description below to hear more about how we can help you with those items. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.